So I will say this car is fast enough for me, and in my opinion, it's fast enough just to not be dangerous. You get a 0 to 60 time of about 6.1 seconds, maybe 5.9, but it's really, if you put your foot down, it'll go, but it won't go fast enough to throw you back in the seat where you can't control it. I had a 19 Model 3 and it kind of did that. Mine was a Standard Range Plus and that was fun, but this right here is just a really practical vehicle. And one of the biggest reasons I got it was because I just had a daughter, so I wanted something where she could have space in the back without being scrunched up. And this, along with the tax credit and the range, that's why I went with this car over my Model 3. Which, like I said, it's not as fast as the Model 3, but it's more fun to drive, in my opinion. And I have the one pedal drive on now, which about 80% of the time will work unless I have to stop abruptly. But what's great about the Mach-e is you're always using regen, and it's kind of blended. So even when you hit the brake pedal, it doesn't have a fluctuation of the brake pedal feel. It's just when you hit the brake pedal, it has a really sharp bite. So you kind of have to get used to it, and you never really do. But it's really not that big of a deal, in my opinion. You can just never have a really crisp stop unless you're able to not touch the brake pedal. And I think the Tesla was a little bit better in that aspect. And you'll probably be able to see when I go over this bump, but there are a few humps on the road that are really rough, and the back end it drives like a Mustang. It really does. So when people complain about using the Mustang name, this is a Mustang. I've driven plenty of them, and this drives just like one. I mean, very, very heavy in the back. If I have my daughter in the back seat and we go over that bump, she basically catches air, which she likes, but her mother doesn't. And I really love the unbridled sound. That's one of my favorite things about this drive mode, other than, of course, having everything that you can have in terms of power. But it's just really, really fun to get that sound going. And if you come out of a corner and nail it, it'll slide, and it's super, super fun. But the traction control, I've heard a lot of complaints about it. I think mostly because it won't pass that moose test. I don't know who does that, but basically if there was something in front of you and you were to swerve, it kind of doesn't keep that line. But when you do give it too much throttle, instead of sending you completely sideways, it kind of keeps that same line, if that makes sense. So I never feel like I'm about to lose control of this car, even though it may slide quite often if I push it. If you're not pushing this car, it really does drive very well. And the next thing I'll probably do to this is put in a sound system. It's really the only thing it needs. This has the stock, I think it's like 6 speakers, and it's not a bad sound. It sounds like my mom used to have a 2011 Ford Edge, and the system was good for a stock system, but you can only push it so much. So I don't know if I'll need to possibly tune the radio as well, but the system is definitely lacking for someone like myself, who is pretty much a connoisseur in sound systems. So I prefer Bose sound systems or Meridian, something like that. So that's probably what I'm going to end up putting in here. And the other thing is, this rapid red metallic really sticks out. So people who have not, I've gotten so many compliments on this car from people who've never seen one in person, from people who have been following them on the internet. I've been told dozens of times, hey, is that new electric Mustang, or is that Mustang truck? And it's just funny having to explain myself to every person, because people always have questions or want to take a picture of it or something like that. In my opinion, this is really the car to beat. Most EVs, I mean, Teslas are great for what they are, but unlike legacy manufacturers, they're kind of learning as they go. And Ford knows how to make cars, Chevy knows how to make cars. Now, I will say they tend to be a little cheaper, especially GM, with how they manufacture their vehicles, but they want to charge premium price points. But I feel like this is absolutely perfect because it's really practical. They look amazing, and they're just so much fun to drive. So for people who want a Model Y, really all you're getting is the added performance, and of course the autopilot, full self-driving, whatever, which that can't be beat. I'll give them that. This system lacks quite a bit comparatively to Tesla's system, but Tesla's is so great, this is still a good system. But if you're used to using Teslas, you're gonna be disappointed. I'll kind of show you the system here. So it's okay, especially on the highway. It does what it needs to do. But it doesn't, I feel like I have to watch this system, whereas in the Tesla, if I wanted to take a nap in that car, which I never did, but if I wanted to, I wouldn't feel like I'd have to worry about myself. Like it would beep really loud or whatever, but this will kind of just, it's not as precise. So every so often it'll go over the lines a little bit and then come back over. But I mean, for the most part, you got to keep your hand on the wheel a lot more than you would in a Tesla anyway. So that won't be an issue. But adaptive cruise with lane centering in general just makes driving so much easier. But you'll see, like coming around this curve here, it kind of bounces outside and then corrects itself. But overall, the wind noise in here is really good. I think it definitely is better than it was in my Tesla. But of course, Tesla's sound system was great compared to this one. I feel like if they would have done a Bose 8-speaker system with a subwoofer, they would have been good to go. But like I said, it's just lacking a little bit. But I'm gonna put it into the whisper mode, and that dials everything back quite a bit. It really is an eco mode in itself. And as you can see, it's still quick coming out of corners and whatnot. I'm just gonna pull up the trip computer. Oh, it's already pulled up actually. So it's showing how much of my battery has been used due to the climate controls, due to the actual driving, and then of course my accessories and just the outside temperature to keep the battery at the optimal temperature it needs to be used. And because of where the center of gravity is on this car, it takes corners really well, in the sense that it doesn't become tail happy just coming out of corners unless you actually give it throttle out of corners, or actually into corners. But if you take a corner fast, it won't necessarily start to lose control where maybe a regular Mustang would, or even a regular SUV would. So I've never felt, even though this isn't an all-wheel drive model, I've never felt like I was needing to let off in a corner or losing control just randomly. Everything is always, even when it burns rubber, it's still very precise in how you'd want it to drive. And on a road like this that has lines, you can actually use the full kind of semi-autonomous driving. And like I said, it is a little buggy, so but it'll stop and all that. We'll give it some throttle here. And of course, that's still in the whisper mode and still super quick. And in this car, you tend to see your quick acceleration after you hit about 10 miles an hour and so on. But from a stop, it's a little sluggish off of the line. But that also, I've never done a burnout in this car from a dead stop. Whereas in the Tesla, it'll do that. But that's probably why, even though the Model 3 is said to be more efficient than this, I get way better range. And if I drive this in whisper and don't try to use up a bunch of energy This gets about the same, in my opinion at least. I feel like it's just as efficient as the Model 3 is. And even though the EPA doesn't say that, I just feel like this drives the same, and the Tesla seems to be more thirsty than it should be based on the numbers. But of course, this only has less than 7,500 miles, and I got my Tesla with about 28,000 miles. So battery degradation might have been a thing too. But like I said, the Model 3 also just gives out more power. That's why it's faster, feels faster. But in my opinion, this seems to be the more practical option, especially with that $7,500 tax credit. And this is going to bring me to the end of my review of my 2021 Ford Mustang Mach-E California Route 1.